Hey everybody, Ethan here with Standing Stone, and we've got Hex ready for his next train retrieve video. Today is fetch. Now, this is probably the hardest part to learn and work through with the largest amount of variance per dog. We have a couple tips and tricks. If you follow along with this video, I'll show you how this process starts. But I do want to mention before we get much further, this is the last video that would be available on YouTube. The rest of Hex's course will be available tied in with our train retrieve course at the Standing Stone School of Dog Training. It's available at standingstonekennels.com/courses. All of our courses are available there. And again, the remaining portion of Hex's series, so from his next fetch portion on, will be also included in the train retrieve course. So you need to go check that out. Now, if you've been following along with this series thus far, you've seen we've worked through holding and walking and holding multiple different objects and all of those fun pieces. And he has a very different personality and temperament and approach to the process than our last major series that we did with Legend. Legend was bold and confident about everything. He is a much more reserved dog all the way around. So we have to approach it slightly differently. I want you to watch that, especially in this fetch process as we're going to move into it. This will be his first day starting fetch work, but we have all of the prerequisites. So if you're finding this video first, you need to go back and watch the rest of them starting. They're all labeled out, step 1, 2, 3 through whatever step today is. Not really sure of the number. Now, when we move into the fetch work portion of things, we've already developed a dog that likes to play fetch, he likes to retrieve, and now this process is breaking down each of the parts of the retrieve into small enough pieces that we can teach them, master them, and then provide our dog with the tools that they need to be able to work with us in extremely high levels of testing and trialing and competition and hunting, so that in those high levels of distraction or environments, we can expect him to do a really good job. He's essentially a professional hunter. If you're looking for your dog to be able to improve, this is the best way that we know to build a reliable and consistent retriever. Now, there are a couple different methods in this bird dog space of how to teach the retrieving portion or the fetching portion of this. A lot of times the term force fetch is used. We don't use that term, and there's a big reason why. I talk about it in the beginning of the beginning videos in this series, but we are going to utilize one of the methods, which is toe hitch. This is a boot string or piece of paracord would be another good option. And we're utilizing this as a form of negative reinforcement, and yeah, that's a piece of string. We're utilizing this as negative reinforcement, and we will transition it to collar conditioning later. As we build through this dog, each dog's individual training, collar conditioning becomes the end-all for proofing the process. And if we start with the collar conditioning portion with most dogs, it tends to have a little bit of confusion because the collar means so many things. So if we can find something else to work into the process, it makes the transition to collar conditioning later a little bit easier. Now, how this goes on, first and foremost, we have a slip knot in here, and this will go above this joint here. This helps to keep it in place, but not provide, it prevents this toe hitch, which is going to wrap around his middle two toes here, and then slip behind that. You can see here, we're behind, and all this does, it gives us a little bit of a tension place. This is a mild annoyance. Now, the biggest mistake that people make, okay, so write this one down, don't ever repeat it. Put it on a piece of paper, throw it away after you get done memorizing this. The biggest mistake that people make with this is thinking that now that we have this magical toe hitch, we just pull on it until the dog goes, ouch, that hurts, opens their mouth and tries to grab something. That would be a more traditional force fetch method, not what we're going for here. What we're going to be doing is providing a mild annoyance. The amount of pressure required can be done like this, okay? So it isn't in the zone that it is going to be uncomfortable for him outside of tapping him on the shoulder. It is designed to be a mild annoyance and then become a signal, just like any verbal cue would to be able to say, grab that, and this will shut off. Now, can we increase the pressure later? A little bit, just like you can with the e-collar. You can utilize slightly higher levels, finding the zone that is the least amount of pressure the dog's going to respond to, but we have to teach it first. So in the beginning stages, this is what we look like. We go back to a dowel. I like the dowel in this situation because it is the smallest and usually the one that we begin training with. So it's typically pretty easy for dogs. If your dog hates this, you need to use something else. Now, in this process, I'm going to take just a brief second. I know we haven't even got started, but momentum is important. So once we get started, I need to focus on that. This information is really important. In our train retrieve course, you're given access to set up weekly check-ins with me. They're 15 minutes. That's all the longer these sessions should be at a maximum. I work with you and I can help give you direction so that you can stay moving in the right direction and finish this process in a reasonable amount of time. The average person that signs up and sets up is done in 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks. Everybody else says this can take upwards of 3 to 4 months. So it's very beneficial to be involved in the course, set up weekly check-ins with me. We will help you and your dog to get through this in a very quick amount of time, very reasonable amount of time with a solid understanding. Now, this is where it seems like you need about 4 or 5 additional hands. And what I've found is a couple things that are helpful to make the process easier. If you have this dowel, you can kind of hold on to the dog's lip, and then that allows you to keep the dog with you, but then get this to go in their mouth, which he is, with all of the hold work that we've done, he's fairly open to that process, okay? Your dog should be as well. Now, what we're going to do here is start to apply pressure. And again, you can see how much we have an eyelet on the table. And this is something that I want to point out is very important. This gives you a stop. And some people say, well, I don't want the stop because it is too much pressure. It's causing a problem. The stop actually allows you to apply consistent pressure, which is very important. We want to know how much is being applied, and you have to watch. Some dogs will pull away from it, and they'll actually apply way more pressure than what we want, so you have to be paying attention to that. I set dog's feet up next to this little eyelet here, and then with hand number 1, I've got the dog's lip on this bumper piece, and then I can kind of work this into his mouth. All right, so this is a tug, 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 tug. This is all the more it is here. And then we're just going to try and, good. And then that shuts off. There's no cues associated with this yet. He doesn't know what it means. Good. So this has to be consistent on and off with when something goes in his mouth, just like any other form of negative reinforcement. Good. That's a light tug there. Has to be, I like this tug, tug, tug method there because of the fact that it is good. It is pressure on and off. Some people utilize a constant tug or continuous pressure on the collar. And we find that a lot of times that overwhelms dogs' brain, that all they can think about is that there's a constant thing there, and then it requires more pressure, or that's the knee-jerk reaction. Like, I feel like, oh, they're ignoring this, I should use more pressure. That's a big mistake that people make on a regular basis. It's not the case. We need to find the amount of pressure that they can respond to. But when you are doing it in this zone, so tug, 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 I can feel it, and then it's off, and I can feel it, and then it's off. And that's where all of these pieces come into play. This being tight up here allows this not to bind up, and then he is feeling that on and off. You can see how this is happening here. So we'll give him this on and off, on and off. Good. That's in his mouth. This should only take a handful of reps. Every dog is a little bit different, but in this step, This is a conditioning process. Good boy. He's already starting to give to it pretty quickly. This is true of dogs that have gone through the process. They've been given the pieces, they've been shown the expectations, and they've been treated fairly. If your dog's up here and you are forcing them through things at a rate that does not fit what they're ready to learn at, then you end up in a zone of a dog that gets near the table and they clam up and they don't want to do anything and they hide their head in the corner. That is not our goal here. Though he seems subdued as a dog, that's his normal personality. So reading your individual dog is important, and that's where those one-on-one classes we can help a lot with. Good boy. Now when you start to see that little bit of give to this, that would be when you can continue to add. Good. You would start to go fetch as it's going into his mouth, okay? These sessions should be short. That's a good boy. Good. These sessions should be short. You should get little pieces at a time. Here we saw open and willingness to open his mouth to put something in. That is all we're looking for in our first session of fetch. You may not even get there in your first session, but most dogs should get to that point that they're opening barely, and then I'm putting it in the rest of the way. He's not reaching and grabbing anything. That's not the expectation at this point, but it is something that we will go to. It's like any type of cue. When we start with dogs with something as simple as sitting, we try and say sit as their butt's touching the ground so that they can build an association. We're going to start to apply these two ways to communicate. These tugging, how do you shut this off? By grabbing something. Well, it happens to shut off when the thing's in my mouth. So they can learn to shut that off by trying to beat the system, essentially. We apply cues, that's fetch. In a few sessions, he will be ready to move on to fetching lots of different things. That is all we have for today, folks. Again, remember, check out to continue following along with this course. You need to check out standingstonesupply.com/courses. Tongue is all kinds of twisted today. And there you will be able to see how he finishes out through collar conditioning, getting off the table, and then back to the field where we're actually killing birds over him again. So I am the guy with the big gun. This is Hex. We will see you hopefully in the course in his next video.